Dafyomi is Sanhedrin Mem Zayin, Sanhedrin 47. We're going to start on the bottom of Mem Vav on the base of 46b, around 10 lines from the bottom. And the Gemara asks the class the question, Ibayalahu, the Gemara asks the question, Haspeda Yakar Dechayave or Yakar Deshechayave? Is a eulogy the honor for the living or the honor for the dead? The Gemara is going to conclude that it's the honor for the honor for the dead. So we have to listen to somebody if he says, don't give me a eulogy. But there have been cases, famous cases in Jewish history where the rabbis gave specific instructions not to eulogize me. And in the end, people did not, the other rabbis ruled we're not supposed to listen. So just bear that in mind. Every case is unique. So Gemara says, why do we care? The one reason why we care, one practical distinction is if he says, don't eulogize me, or let's say their relatives don't want to pay. They don't want to pay for the eulogizer. You have to pay the guy to give the eulogy. They don't want to pay for the rabbi. So do we force them to pay? If it's for the dead, that we force them to pay. If it's for the living, we don't force them to pay. So the Gemara says, Tashma, let's try and bring a proof. By Yavo Abram was Sarah with Kosa. Abram came to cry for Sarah and to eulogize her. Now, the Amris Mishum Yikar Dechayehavi, if it's for the living, Mishum Yikar de Abram Mashalo with Sarah. Meaning to say, the question the Gemara is because until Abram got there from his house, until Abram came from the Akedah, from the binding of Isaac, which is from the Temple Mount all the way till Hebron, it was a little bit. So if he had to wait to this degree, then we're saying that as a consequence of this, as a consequence of giving him honor, he's delaying her burial, and that's disrespect to her. So it must be that it's for the dead. So that's what it says. The Gemara says, no. Sarah Gufa, no, it was really Sarah herself was to her benefit to give honor to the living. That's really the answer in all these cases, that it's a combination of both. The dead wanted the honor for the living by having a big levaya, not for her, but for him. So next attempt, Tashma v'saftu will call Yisrael v'kavru oso. So it says with respect to Avia, the son of Yeravam, that Elisha had said that nobody from Yeravam's family was going to be eulogized or buried except for Avia, and that said that all of Israel eulogized him and they buried him, but everybody else in his family was wicked. If you want to say it's for Yikar Dechayim, it's to give honor to everybody else in the family. Hanach b'nei Yikar, no, we don't want to give honor to the living, to his family members. They were wicked. So the Gemara says, no, no, nevertheless, even though the honor is for the living, we could say it's good for the tzaddikim that when they die, all the other people are honored, both good and bad, and so therefore it was good for him that they eulogize him. Meaning to say, it's again this combination of the two. Tashma, another attempt. It says by Jeremiah about the town of Anatot, which is where Jeremiah was from. It says that Jeremiah prophesies that this town will not be eulogized, or yispadu v'ikaveru. They will not be eulogized and they will not be buried. Now, if you had a question, Benedict? So if the eulogy is because of honor for the living, they had righteous amongst them. So why would they not eulogize? Why would they not eulogize them under those circumstances? So the Gemara says, no, the tzaddikim would not have wanted to be honored amongst the wicked. And so therefore, they said, better not to eulogize the wicked, and we won't be eulogized amongst them. So Tashma, another attempt. So it says, in Jeremiah prophesies about King Tzidkiyahu. He says, B'Shalom Tamud, says about King Tzidkiyahu, you're not going to be killed in battle. You're going to die a natural death. Just like the the objects of the other kings are burnt when they die, so too your possessions will be burned. Meaning you'll die like a king. And you'll be eulogized. Well, why does he care how he's eulogized? If it's for the honor for the living, why does he care how he's eulogized? Gemara says, no, this is what it means. It's just saying that the Jewish people will be honored just like they're honored, just like they were honored through your father, they're going to be honored through you. Meaning to say that it was good for Tzidkiyahu that the Jewish people will be honored through him, just like the Gemara said. Again, it's the same idea that there's this combination that the dead want the living to be honored. Tashma, it says in Psalm 15, Nimzebeinav Nimas. It says, who will go up on to the mountain of God? One who is Nikik Chapayim Ubar Levav, and somebody who thinks that he is Nivzebeinav, that this person who is not arrogant, because he recognizes the greatness of God, that this person will go up. And it says, Zeh, who is this verse referring to? Chizkiyahu Melch Yehuda. This refers to Chizkiyahu, the king of Judah. This refers to Chizkiyahu, the king of Judah. Shekir Atzmos Aviv Almita Shachavalim. That what did he do? Is he dragged the bones of his father Achaz on ropes. And so if it's to give honor to the living, my daima, why would Chizkiyahu do this? He's just desecrating himself. So the Gemara says, no, he did it. He wanted to be an atonement for his father. So that's why he did it. So the Gemara says, Mishum kapar avua ma'ashel Yisrael. So the Gemara says that, well, we don't understand that. So because we want to give an honor to his father, we push off the whole honor of the Jewish people by having him dragged on the ropes. The Gemara says, yes, Yisrael Gufaya, the Jewish people themselves, the Jewish people themselves wanted the king to be atoned, and they waived their honor so that the king would be atoned. Another attempt that this is not coming from the Bible, but from Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and he was a very humble man. We know the last Mishnah in Soto, it says that when Rabbi died, it says that humility died. So Rabbi says, Amron altis paduni ba'yaros, do not eulogize me in the cities, in the small cities. If it's honor for the living, my not calling me. What does Rabbi care who eulogizes them? So the answer is no, he was doing it for them. He says there'll be greater honor for you if you have the people in the small villages come to the large cities and make big funerals. Okay, another attempt. Tashma Braisa. Halinu Lechvodo, that you're allowed to leave the person over, delay his burial for his own honor. Lavilo Aaron v'tachrichin, to bring him to bring his coffin and his shrouds. Then if you did that, ain't no overlap. You're not in violation of the principle of not delaying the burial. That if you do it for the honor of the dead, it's okay. So it doesn't prove that you're allowed to delay it for the honor of the dead. And so therefore this is a proof that the eulogy is for the honor for the dead. The Gemara says, no, no, you do it for the living. You're allowed to delay it to give honor to the living. The Gemara says, wait, it doesn't make sense. Because we want to give honor to the living, we're going to delay the burial of the deceased, or mavis here means delay. So does that make sense? You know how to do that. It's a prohibition. So Gemara says the same answer we've been saying before. Yes, you're allowed to do it. Ki amar Rachmana, well, so in the what's all eight, dumya the toy the ispe bizayon. Well, it's not going to be a disgrace here. That you're not allowed to leave him not buried in a manner that's disgraceful to him. But now you're not leaving him in a manner that's disgraceful because you're doing it in order to bury him properly. Another attempt, and this one will be the penultimate attempt. Tashma, it says, Halinu lechvodo. Let's say you left over the burial of the person in order to honor him properly, l'shama of ayaros, so that in order to make a greater gathering in the towns, to escort him, or l'havilo mekonanos, in order to get the proper music wailers to come to the levayo, or l'havilo aron v'tachrichin, or to bring him a coffin or shrouds. Ain't no overlap. He's not in violation. Shekoa oseh. Because all of this is for the honor of the dead. So we see from here that it's for the purpose of the dead and not the purpose of the living. So the Gemara says no. All the Bryce is teaching is called also kvodo shalchai. Whoever does something which will make it a more honorable funeral for the living, ain bo bizayon, then it's not going to be at all desecration for the dead. Tashman, last attempt, and this is what proves Rav Natsan Omer Simon Yafal Mace. It's a good sign for the deceased. Sheniframi menu lachar misa. When you punish him after his death, when his body is desecrated, because he gets an atonement, and he's not going to get he's going to go straight into heaven. He's getting his atonement in this manner. It's a good sign. So sometimes happens. What happens? What is a recognition of a good sign? Meshul or Nisbad, if the deceased is not eulogized, or Nikbar, or he's not buried, or Shachaya Gorasa, or the animal dragged him or ate him, or Shayu Gisham Mizalfan Amitato, or the rains came down and ruined his funeral beer. This is all a good sign. I've seen this, unfortunately, you've seen things happen at funerals and everybody's all shocked. But you could quote this: if this ever happens, you just say it's a good sign that this happened. Like if somebody drops the coffin or stuff like that, you say it's a good sign from here. He's going straight to heaven. Shema mina yakar deshachvihu. So anyway, this proves it's honor for the deceased, and indeed Shema mina. We do indeed learn that from here. So the person who was executed said the Mishnah, you would not bury him in the grave of his father, but rather they had two burial places established by the court. One for those who were killed by burning and stoning, and one for those who were either strangled or had their heads chopped off. And the Gemara will now explain why they weren't buried just in their family burial plot. The wicked one is not supposed to be buried next to a tzaddik. This became, I heard from Rav Shachter, that this is the reason why all the synagogues have their own family have their own burial plots, because presumably all the people in the same synagogue do the same sin. They used to have synagogues for the carpenter, synagogues for the electrician, synagogues for each person. So the people there, they all do the same sin. So therefore, you're buried with your synagogue because you don't want to be buried somebody who's not as big a sinner as next to the other one. So therefore, we don't want to bury a wicked one with the righteous one. So therefore, the people who were executed are not buried in their family burial plot. How do we know a wicked one is not buried with a righteous one? Ish. So this comes from the verse. This is a story from Elisha. It says they were burying a false prophet. They were burying a man there. Vinay roas like a dude, and they saw the army coming. And they threw this man, this false prophet, into the grave of Elisha. And the man, he touched Elisha's body. And Elisha didn't want him buried there. Elisha was buried there by Yechi, and the guy got up immediately by Yocham al Ragov, just so he wouldn't be buried there. And so the reason why was he resurrected? Because he shouldn't have been buried next to Elisha. And so therefore we see from here that you don't bury a wicked one with a tzaddik. So I'm really Rav Papa, wait, well, how's this a proof that that's the reason why he got resurrected? Because he can't be buried next to Elisha. Maybe the reason was to fulfill the blessing that Elijah gave to Elisha before he separated him in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 9. It says, that you're going to have double my miracles. And since he resurrected, Eliyahu resurrected one, Elisha was going to resurrect 2. And so maybe this was the second person who he was resurrecting. So Amarle, no, no, that's why we learned, if that was the reason, that we learned in the Brisa that he got up on his legs, but he didn't go to his house. So since he didn't go anywhere, how would this be a fulfillment of the blessing of Elisha? Of the resurrection. So from the fact that he didn't go anywhere, this proves that he wasn't really resurrected, just so that he wouldn't be buried next to Elisha. So where did Elisha actually fulfill this idea of resurrecting 2 people? Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Sheripa Saras Naaman. Naaman was the king who had the general of the Arameans, and he had leprosy. And Elisha healed him. And so by healing him, that's considered resurrection, because the Mitzorah is one of the 4 people who are considered like they're dead. Who are the 4 people? Misha and Lobanim, somebody who is a suma and somebody who is an ani. The person who is blind, no children, or who's poor, they're all limited in their ability to give, and so therefore, in a certain sense, they're called like they're dead. I'll not because after how do we know that the Mitzvah is like the dead? Because Moshe prays for his sister. That Aaron asks Moshe to pray for Miriam. He says, "Don't let her be like a dead person." And so since Moshe prayed for her, that means that he like resurrected. Just like we don't bury a rasha with a tzaddik, we don't bury a more severe wicked person with a less severe wicked person. So if that's the case, that's the Marabuisko and Arbak for us. So you shouldn't have 2 graves, you should have 4 cemeteries. Where it says, now, Shnei Kvaros Gemara Gemiru, the idea that there should be 2 graves for all 4 executions is Gemara Gemiru, which Rashi says is the law from Moses at Sinai. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So now we go into a little bit of a different topic. This is, it at first seems unrelated, but in the end I'll bring a proof from our Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say a person ate the forbidden fat, so you have to bring a carbon chatas for that. The hifresh carbon, and he separated an animal to bring as a sin offering. The hamir daito, and then what happened was he became a meshumad, he became a apostate, or he converted. He tried to convert out, and so now he can't bring his sacrifice because you don't bring a sacrifice from a heretic. The chazarbo, but after he became a heretic, he decided, you know what, I repent. Now we say at this point all the nitcha. So since at that time there was a period of time where that animal was actually not capable of being brought, so it was disqualified for that moment. It's now totally disqualified, and even though he repented, he has to separate a new animal, and that animal cannot be brought as the sacrifice. And so what would happen to that animal? So that animal is not able to be brought as a sacrifice. I'm just trying to wonder if that is one of the 5 chatos that are mesos. I'm not sure. Maybe a footnote in the article tells us that. But that animal can't be brought. So that animal cannot be brought as an offering because I think it's like the chatas whose owner has died, which you stick in the room and you let it to die. But it's but I don't think this is one of the 5 classic examples. So maybe it's maybe they just let it in the pasture. I'm not sure. Let's see if Rashi says here a carbon okay, it doesn't. Rashi doesn't tell us exactly here. So the Gemara says, and Itmar Nami also learned Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Avo Amar Rabbi Yochanan Achal Chela ve'ifresh karban v'nishtata. So he ate the non-kosher fat. He separated the sin offering, and then he became insane. Also, an insane person can't bring a sacrifice. Then he became healed. We say, "Oh, well, since it was disqualified for a little bit, it's going to be disqualified, and so therefore can never be brought. We need to be taught by both cases. If we just had the case of the person who became a heretic, he himself became the heretic, so therefore he can't bring it. But the insane person, he didn't bring that on himself. It just happened. Maybe it's like he's sleeping, and so therefore it's not considered like it's pushed off, because when you're sleeping, your sacrifice is not pushed off. So also in this case, maybe it's not pushed off. And if we just have the case of the person who loses his mind, we say mishum deim biyado achzor. It's not necessarily in his mind to repair himself. But the case of the heretic, the biyado achzor, where it's in his mind to repair himself, aim alone. Maybe the carbon is not considered pushed off. So we need both cases. You see a little bit of an insight into the rabbi's view of mental illness here. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Afana Nami Tanina. We also learned in this brayso, like Rabbi Yochanan, that once the sacrifice is pushed off, it's pushed off and cannot be brought. So here we're talking about an Ir Dachas, which is a city where the majority of the people worship idolatry, and then all the possessions of that town have to be burnt. So Hayuba, let's say they were in that town, kachim. They were sacrificed. The animals that were dedicated to be brought on the altar, even though they're not going to be considered booty, and burnt. Never, and so therefore they're not burnt. Nevertheless, they cannot be brought because it says that the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. So kachim is if they are something that's supposed to be brought, i.e., an ola or some yamusu. Then we just say we stick them in a small place and we let them die. We just feed them barley until their bodies break up. Kachi bedek habayis, if they are just their value is dedicated, you redeem them, and they're not going to be prohibited. The we question, Amaya Musa, why do they have to die? Even the Iktol, Avilu Kapara. Since they'll be killed, there'll be an atonement. So we say, why do we say that the ones that are sanctified for the dead will have to die? Let them be brought, and it'll be atonement. And then you bring them to the, so basically once these people die, you could bring their sacrifices after they're dead. So why do we not allow them to be brought? Isn't this a proof for the idea that once they're pushed off, for that moment they can't be brought, they're always pushed off? Where do you get this idea that if you die as a punishment for being wicked, that's an atonement? If you die as a result of your wickedness, that's not atonement. Tani Rav Shemaya, I might think, since the Torah says that a Kohen can become tummy for 7 relatives, I might think, let's say one of his 7 relatives, Rahman al-San, is a wicked person. I might think that Kohen can become tummy for him. We say Ba'amav, but only if he acts properly can the Kohen become tummy. So we see from here, even though he dies, it's not automatically atonement if he doesn't repent. So Rabba challenges, Amalei Rabba, Mika Medamis, Nerag mitoch risho, amaze mitoch risho. How can you compare somebody who's executed on account of his wickedness to somebody who just dies on account of his wickedness? Maze mitoch risho, since if he dies from his wickedness, even the urche kamayas, since he died in normal manner, well, that's not an atonement. But nerag mitoch risho, but if he's executed because of his wickedness, even the lavki urche kamayas, since he didn't die in the typical manner, havai kapar, that's an atonement. And Teda, I'll prove it to you because it says, Mizmor la'asaf Elohim ba'u gayim b'nachosecha timu esecho kachecha nasnu es nivlas avadecha machal of Hashemayim besar chasidecha chayas ha'aretz. This is the psalm. It says God says that the nations came into your land. They desecrated your temple. They gave the carcasses of your servant as bird feed, and the flesh of your pious one to the animals. Now, who are the ones who are called the servants of God and the pious? Your actual pious ones. And avadecha, these are the ones who were found guilty and they were executed. So once they're killed, they'll call your servants. So Rav is saying, once they're executed, they'll call your servants. So therefore, if that's the case, and so therefore, once they're executed, they should be able to be, this is a proof for that since you still can't bring their sacrifices, this is a proof that once it's pushed off, it's pushed off. Can you really compare the Haruge Malchus, Haruge Bestin? How can you compare somebody who's killed through the enemy to somebody who's killed by the court? They're not the same. Haruge Malchus, one who's killed by the enemy, keeping the Shalom Bedin coming play. They didn't do anything. It wasn't ruling of the court, Havil Kapar, that's an atonement. Therefore, they're going to be called your servants in the psalm. But Haruge Bezdin, but those who are executed by the court, like the Irani Dachas, even the Bedin Kamakitli, since they're killed, or on top of 47b, since they're killed because of the ruling of the court, Havil Kapara. So that's not an atonement. So, and Teda, the Tanan, like we learned in our Mishnah, so they wouldn't bury him in the burial place of his fathers. If you want to say, once he's executed, it's an atonement, litbru. Basically, he would have been buried there. We're seeing a fundamental dispute between Abaye and Rava. How do we view this person as he's executed? Once he's executed, do we say, oh, you did the crime, you did the time, you did your punishment, now we view you as a penitent? Or do we say, no, that was the punishment? You would need to do something in addition to that. So therefore, that's the dispute here. And so the Gemara now challenges, the Gemara says, Al miso kvura ba'ina. You would require, even those who are killed by the court, they don't achieve atonement just by their death, but only he needs the death and also the burial, which is a little bit of a difficult answer. As long as he has not been buried, he has not achieved atonement. So most of Ravada Barava, well, we have another answer that it says that in the Mishnah, that another question, but it says those who are more, they wouldn't mourn for those who were executed by the court. They would just grieve in their hearts. They wouldn't sit shiva, so to speak, but they would be grieving in their hearts. If you want to say that once they're buried, they have an atonement, then well, after they're buried, let them sit shiva. Gemara says, no, but nami equal basar. We require the flesh to decompose. And only then will they achieve the atonement. Once the flesh is decomposed, then we gather up the bones. And then we bury him in the family burial spot. After the flesh decomposed, then it was a proper atonement, and then we could bury him. Shema mina. Rav Ashi says, Avelus me'imasai kamaslawas. So he says, you don't need the decomposition of the flesh, says Rav Ashi. What's the reason why you don't mourn for him? He has a technical answer. The mourning only begins only once the coffin was closed. And so, but when is there an atonement? When is the atonement achieved? When you see a little bit of pain on the grave. So since at the time of the mourning, when the mourning was supposed to start, since at that moment the atonement had not yet been achieved because there wasn't the pain of the grave yet, so the mourning was pushed off. And since you missed the start of the mourning, you totally missed it. So if that's the case, why does he have to wait until the decomposition of the flesh to move him to the family grave? Because since you can't move the body until the body decomposes, because since his body is like mutilated, it's not proper to move it at that point. It's just not a possibility. And so the end result of all this is that they're basically, according to Rav Ashi's answer, he's a technical answer. Why are you not mourning for him? Because at the moment where the shiva would have begun, he had not yet achieved atonement. The atonement only happens once there's pain in the burial. And now we have an interesting story. Gemara is going to explain that there are certain things about the dead that are prohibited to have benefit from. But there's a circumstance also where they're not prohibited. Kivro de Rav, the burial of Rav, have a shakli mine afro hishase bat yoma. They used to think that the grave of Rav the earth around his grave had some potency, and so they would take from it the earth to heal the fever, 1-day-old fever. Also, Amarle Shmuel, they came and they said this to Shmuel. Shmuel said, Yasaf demon, you're doing good. Because Karka Olamu, you mean to say you're allowed to take this earth. Why? Because the earth around the grave is not the dead man. It belongs to the world. Karka Olam ain't in this earth. The earth itself can't be prohibited. Because it says in Kings that they threw the earth of the idolatry. They took the ashes of the idolatry that they made very thin, like earth, and they put it on the graves of those idolaters in order to intimidate those who are alive. And from the fact that it compares, hold on one second, I'll answer your question. Asher Atem Yershimo Sam, it says Makish Kever Bnei Adam Avodas Kochanim. We compare the graves of the people or worship idolatry of people to idolater. You can't make something that's worship that's still attached to the ground. You can't make it prohibited. Meaning to say, the idolatry, if a person worships a tree, you can't make that tree prohibited for other people. It's only if it's removed from the ground. So to here also, if the earth itself around the grave is not prohibited to have benefit, That doesn't mean it can't become tamei. It could have particles of the bones in them. You have to be careful. So if the earth is not earth, but it's filled with bones, then you can't have any benefit from it because you have to be sure that not in those bones is the earth. In addition to that, that we have a general concept that within the area around the deceased is tamei because of the tuma extends a certain distance. And that's different than getting benefit from the earth. But if you think that there might be a dead body there or some bones of a dead body, then we have the law of the rekev, of the dust of the corpse, which I've seen also in my lifetime. I've seen the dust of corpses, and you saw also, Shia, when we went to the burial places in Ukraine, and you see that the bones were there, and then there's the dust of the corpse around it. So this is an issue. So the Gemara challenges this idea from Shmuel, where Shmuel is saying that the earth around the grave is not prohibited to have benefit. Mace, hey, we learned in the Brisa, Chotzev Kever. Well, if somebody who hews out, they used to bury them in a crypt, so he hew out a space in the cave for his father. But now he goes and buries his father somewhere else. You cannot bury anybody else in that place because once this grave was established for somebody, it becomes prohibited to have benefit. So we see even though it's attached to the ground, it's prohibited. Gemara says, no, skin, what are they talking about? The kever binyan. That was not actually attached to the ground, that he built stones and on top of the ground. And so since he built it while it was detached, therefore, even though now it's attached, it's prohibited to have benefit from it. This is what they would do. They would build a grave, and after they built it, they would put it into the ground. Prefab. Tashma kever chadash mutar ba'ana. I mean, it's really hard to know exactly what that is. You would have to know it's called the realia to see exactly how they built the grave there, but you get the point. And we're talking about a case which was not that it wasn't actually attached to the ground. Another attempt, let's say you have a new grave, mutar ba'ana, you'll have a benefit from it because nobody's buried in there. But hita bo nefel, but let's say you put in like an aborted fetus, asar ba'ana, that you can't have benefit from it. So we see from here that the grave itself, even though it's attached, you can't have benefit. No, again, we're talking about a prefab item that was built above the ground. So there's another price. It says that there are three types of graves. Kever nimtza. There's a grave that you find. If somebody finds a new grave in his field and he knows that it was buried in his field without his permission, kever yadua, that there is a grave that basically that was buried there with permission, and kever mazik esarabim. Then there's a grave that is found in like a public thoroughfare, and people are becoming tamei from it. Kever anim. So let's say you discover that somebody buried somebody in an unauthorized manner in your yard. You're allowed to move it. This guy came into your place and buried without permission. You can move it, and pino makom tar, and after you move it, it's permitted. And you're allowed to have benefit. Kever yadua, if you know about the grave, also for no so upinu makom tamei, that you're not allowed to move it, and once you move it, the place remains tamei. V'asar bana, you're not allowed to have benefit. Kever amazik esarabim, a grave that damages the community because it's found in a public place, a public thoroughfare, so you can move it. You're allowed to move the graves if they're in a disturbing place. And this is a big problem in Israel today. And after you move it, the place is tar, but you can't have any benefit. So we see from here that also the ground itself is prohibited to have benefit. Whereas no, we're talking about this type of prefab structure. Talking about this prefab structure. So that good morning. So the Gemara says, the Gemara challenges this because we say, is it really the case that if you find a grave in your yard, you're allowed to move it? Dilma meis mitzvah. Maybe the person who died there was what's called an unaccompanied dead body, and if like there's a person who dies with nobody to care for him, we say meis mitzvah kana mekomo. Such a person has acquired his place, and so you wouldn't be allowed to move it. If somebody just drops dead, Rahman al-Islam, let's say, there was a plane crash in Philadelphia, and the people just crashed right onto homes. and he falls into the yard. Now, I'm sure the family members would want to move those person, but let's say they didn't. Bury him right there. He's allowed to. So how can you move him? Shani Mace Mitzvah, the Kohes. No, everybody would know. If it was a Mace Mitzvah, it wouldn't be a grave that was found. You would know if somebody died unusual death right there. I don't know. That's the case. Imar, Haoreg Beged Lameis, somebody who weaves. So now we're talking about something that once you designate it to be built, whether you can remain there. So somebody says, let's say you weave a garment for a dead body, Abai Amar Asar, and you didn't use it yet, but you wove it with the intent to put it on this dead body as a shroud, then you can no longer derive benefit from it. Rava says, Mutter. Rava says you're allowed. Abai Amar Asar Hazmana Milsi. From the fact that you prepared it, even though you didn't use it yet, then it's considered to be as though it was done for the dead and you can't have benefit. Rava says, Hazmana Lav Milsi. It's not. The preparatory act does not make it prohibited. I was saying, like, sometimes people build a house, they haven't used it yet, and they build a bathroom. But you haven't used the bathroom yet, but is the bathroom like considered a bathroom yet? That's a whole separate story. My time of the Abaye, I heard from one of my teachers. He said that Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik said he would put his tefillin on top. He would put his tefillin on top of a toilet in nowadays, because our toilets are not bathrooms, because it's not there anymore. I think that was an exaggeration. What's the reason of Abaye? Gamar sham shame egla arufa. We learn that from an egla arufa, and also from Miriam. My egla arufa, just like this calf that was killed. Bazmana mitzvah. Once it was prepared for, it was prohibited. Hainami bazmana mitzvah. And Rava, you know what? We'll start this whole idea about the weaving of the garments tomorrow, because Benedict's shir starts in 5 minutes. A yashakoach to everybody, yashakoach, and Benedict's shir starts in 5 minutes.